What you're about to hear happened at one of the most expensive parties in New York City, and it ended with a woman in a maid's uniform standing in the rain, humiliated in front of 200 guests. Nobody there knew who she really was. Nobody knew that the man throwing the party had been watching every second of it. And nobody, not even her, knew that this one night would change everything. Stay with me. This gets unbelievable. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Which country do you call home? Drop it in the comments. I love reading where you all are from. Tonight's story is one of the most emotional ones we've ever told. About pride, about being underestimated, and about a secret that was hiding in plain sight the whole time. Trust me, you will not see this ending coming. Let's get into it. It started like every other day at the Whitfield estate. Maria Alvarez had worked as a housekeeper for the Whitfield family for almost 3 years. She was 26, quiet, hardworking, and always early. She folded towels the way her mother taught her. Corners first, edges last. And she never once complained about the 12-hour shifts or the marble floors that seemed to stretch on forever. Maria wasn't from money. She grew up in a small apartment in Queens with her father, Manuel, a mechanic who worked with his hands until his knees gave out, and her mother, who cleaned office buildings at night so Maria could go to community college during the day. Maria never finished her business degree. Her father got sick, the medical bills piled up, and one semester turned into a leave of absence that never ended. She took the housekeeping job at the Whitfield estate because it paid well and because Daniel Whitfield, the owner, had a reputation for treating his staff fairly. Daniel Whitfield was 34, sharp-eyed, and impossibly wealthy. His family's company, Whitfield Global, had its hands in shipping, real estate, and technology. He was the kind of man magazines loved to photograph and gossip columns loved to speculate about. But behind the tailored suits and the boardroom confidence, Daniel was tired. Tired of people wanting things from him. Tired of smiling for cameras. Tired most of all of his own engagement. 6 months earlier, Daniel had proposed to Vivian Cross, a woman his mother adored and his business partners approved of. Vivian was beautiful, polished, and always said the right thing in front of the right people. But something about her had always felt rehearsed. Daniel told himself it was nerves. He told himself a lot of things. Tonight was the engagement gala. 300 guests, string quartet, champagne towers, the whole spectacle. Maria wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the guests. Her job was simple. Help the catering staff in the back, make sure the coat room stayed organized, and stay invisible. That was the rule for house staff during events. Stay invisible. But at 8:47 p.m., one of the catering trays slipped from a nervous new waiter's hands right in the middle of the ballroom entrance, and champagne glasses shattered across the marble floor in front of half the guest list. Maria, who happened to be walking by with a stack of clean linens, didn't think twice. She knelt down and started cleaning it up before someone slipped and got hurt. That's when Vivian Cross walked in. She was wearing a red silk gown that had cost more than Maria's yearly salary. Her hair perfectly curled, a glass of champagne already in her hand. She stopped mid-step when she saw Maria kneeling on the floor in her uniform, guests parting around her like she was something to be avoided. "What," Vivian said, loud enough for the room to hear, "is the help doing on the main floor?" The music didn't stop, but conversations did. Heads turned. Maria stood up slowly, a shard of glass still in her hand. "I'm sorry, ma'am. There was an accident, I don't care what there was." Vivian's voice cut through the air like a blade. "This is my engagement party. I did not invite the cleaning staff to stand in the middle of it." A few guests laughed nervously. Others looked away, uncomfortable but silent. Maria felt her face go hot, her hands trembling slightly as she set the glass down on the tray. "I'll go," she said quietly. "No," Vivian said, stepping closer, loud enough that even the string quartet faltered. "You'll leave. Get your things and get out of this house tonight. I don't want to see your face here again." Maria's chest tightened. 3 years of early mornings, of remembering everyone's coffee order, of covering shifts when other staff called out, reduced to nothing in front of a room full of strangers. She looked around for someone, anyone who might say something. No one did. What Maria didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Daniel Whitfield was standing at the top of the staircase, 1 floor above the ballroom, and he had heard every single word. Daniel gripped the marble railing so hard his knuckles turned white. He had come upstairs to take a phone call from his lawyer about an unrelated matter, and from the 2nd floor landing, he had a clear view straight down into the ballroom. He watched Vivian point toward the door. He watched Maria's shoulders curl inward, the way someone's body does when they're trying to disappear. He watched 200 people say absolutely nothing. He should have gone down immediately. Later, he would wonder why he didn't. Maybe it was shock. Maybe some old, cowardly part of him didn't want to cause a scene at his own engagement party. Whatever the reason, by the time he started moving, Maria was already walking toward the front entrance, her chin lifted, refusing to let anyone see her cry. She didn't even go back for her coat. Daniel took the stairs 2 at a time, but by the time he reached the ground floor, the heavy front doors were already swinging shut behind her, and rain, the first real storm of the season, was hammering down outside. He pushed the door open and stepped out onto the front steps. Maria was standing in the downpour, soaked within seconds, holding the small suitcase she kept in the staff room for her uniform changes. She hadn't even grabbed an umbrella. She just stood there, rain running down her face, mixing with something that might have been tears or might have just been the storm. "Maria," Daniel called. She turned, startled, wiping her face quickly like she could hide it. "Mr. Whitfield. I'm sorry about the... I'll be gone in just a... You don't need to apologize." His voice was firm but not unkind. "I saw everything." Maria blinked at him through the rain. "You saw?" "I was upstairs. I heard all of it." Daniel stepped down onto the wet stone steps, not caring that his $3,000 suit was getting drenched. "You didn't do anything wrong." Behind him, the front door opened again, and Vivian appeared, wrapped in a shawl. Her expression shifting quickly from irritation to something more careful when she saw Daniel standing in the rain with a maid she'd just thrown out. "Daniel, darling, what are you doing? You'll catch a cold. Come inside, our guests are asking." "Vivian." Daniel didn't turn around right away. "Why did you throw Maria out?" There was a pause, just half a second too long. She was making a scene in front of everyone. Someone had to handle it. She was cleaning up a mess someone else made. Daniel finally turned to face her. "In front of 200 people, you humiliated a woman who has worked in this house for 3 years without a single complaint against her. And you did it because..." "What?" "Because she was visible." Vivian's jaw tightened. "Daniel, we can talk about this inside. This isn't the place." "No," Daniel said quietly. "I think this is exactly the place." Maria stood there, rain-soaked and frozen, watching the 2 of them, the man she worked for, and the woman she'd never really understood, standing at odds in front of her for the very first time. She wanted to disappear into the storm. "Mr. Whitfield, please, it's all right, I'll just..." "Wait," Daniel said, holding up a hand gently. "Please. Just... wait 1 moment." And in that pause, in that single suspended second on the rain-soaked steps of the Whitfield estate, something shifted. Something none of them, not Daniel, not Vivian, and certainly not Maria, could have predicted. Because the next thing Daniel said would unravel a secret that had been sitting quietly beneath the surface of this house for 3 long years. "Maria," Daniel said slowly, "do you remember the interview? 3 years ago." She frowned, rain dripping from her lashes. Of course I remember, sir. Do you remember what you told me? When I asked why I should hire you over the 12 other applicants with more experience? Maria swallowed hard, confused by the sudden shift. I told you that experience doesn't mean someone will treat your home with respect. That I grew up watching my mother clean office buildings at night, and I knew what it meant to actually care about the work, not just do it. That's right. Daniel's eyes hadn't left hers. You also told me your father used to work on cars for a shipping company in Red Hook. A small operation. Family-owned. Maria's stomach dropped slightly. She didn't understand why this mattered right now, standing in a storm, soaked to the bone. Yes, sir. Alvarez Auto and Fleet. It went under years ago. It didn't go under, Daniel said. It was bought out. In a hostile acquisition. By a shipping conglomerate that undercut every contract your father had, forced him into bankruptcy, and then quietly absorbed his client list within 18 months. Vivian, standing in the doorway, had gone very still. I know this, Daniel continued, because I've spent the last 2 years going through my late father's old business records. Whitfield Global bought Alvarez Auto and Fleet's contracts in 2011. My father authorized it. I didn't know the details until last spring when I found the files myself, and I recognized the name Alvarez immediately, because it was already sitting in my staff file. Because you were already working in my house. Maria stood frozen, rain streaming down her face, her mind racing to catch up. I don't understand. Are you saying? I'm saying that my family's company destroyed your father's business, Daniel said, his voice cracking slightly. And I hired his daughter 3 years ago without putting the pieces together, and when I finally did, I didn't know how to tell you. I told myself I'd find the right moment. I told myself I'd make it right somehow, quietly, without making you relive it. And instead tonight, I stood upstairs and watched my fiancé throw you out into the street like you meant nothing. His voice broke on the last word. I am so sorry, Maria. For all of it. The rain kept falling. Vivian's face had gone pale, her earlier irritation replaced with something closer to panic, because she understood, faster than anyone, exactly what this meant for the story she'd spent months building for herself. If Daniel felt guilty about the Alvarez family, if he felt responsible, Vivian's carefully constructed position in his life had just become very, very unstable. Maria opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. 3 years of quiet resentment she never let herself fully feel, toward a company, a family, a name she cleaned house for every single day, collided with the impossible fact that the man standing in front of her, rain-soaked and shaking with guilt, hadn't known either. Not for most of it. You knew, she finally whispered. For how long? 8 months, Daniel admitted. I've been trying to find a way to make it right without turning your life upside down. I set aside funds to help rebuild what your father lost. I was going to tell you when the time was right. He looked down, ashamed. I should have told you the second I found out. Behind them, Vivian's voice cut in, sharp and cold. Are you seriously doing this right now? In front of our guests? Over the help? And that single sentence, the help, was the moment everything Daniel had been quietly ignoring about his engagement finally became impossible to ignore any longer. Daniel turned to face Vivian fully now, rain running down both their faces, the warm golden light of the ballroom spilling out behind them onto the wet stone steps. Say that again, he said quietly. Vivian blinked, caught off guard by the coldness in his voice. Daniel, I just meant. You called her the help twice tonight, Daniel said. Once to throw her out of a party she wasn't even part of, and once just now, standing in front of her, like she isn't a person who can hear you. She works for you, Vivian snapped, her composure finally cracking. That is literally her job description. Her name is Maria Alvarez, Daniel said. Her father built a business from nothing before my family's company crushed it. She has shown more integrity in 3 years cleaning this house than I've seen from half the people inside that ballroom tonight." He paused, and something in his expression settled, like a decision finally being made after months of hesitation. "I think I've known for a while that this wasn't right. I kept telling myself it would get easier, that I was just nervous. But watching you throw a good person out into a storm because she was inconvenient to look at, that's not nerves, Vivian. That's who you are." The ballroom doors were open behind them now, guests beginning to gather in the entryway, drawn by the commotion, whispering behind champagne flutes. Vivian's face had gone from pale to furious. "You cannot be serious. You're going to end our engagement, at our own engagement party, over a maid." "I'm ending it," Daniel said evenly, "because you just showed me, in front of everyone, exactly the kind of person you are when you think it doesn't cost you anything. And I don't want to spend my life with someone who treats people like they're disposable." Gasps rippled through the small crowd now gathered at the door. Someone had already pulled out a phone. Vivian, realizing the moment was slipping entirely out of her control, turned and stormed back inside without another word. Her red dress disappearing into the golden light of the ballroom, the door slamming behind her. For a moment, it was just Daniel and Maria, standing alone on the rain-soaked steps. "Mr. Whitfield, you didn't have to do that," Maria said softly. "Not because of me." "I didn't do it because of you," Daniel said, and then, catching himself, corrected. "I mean, not only because of you. You just made it impossible for me to keep pretending. Please come inside. You're freezing, and this rain isn't stopping any time soon." Maria hesitated, glancing back toward the mansion, toward the guests still whispering by the door. "I don't think I belong at that party, sir." "You belong wherever you choose to be," Daniel said. "But if you want, there's a guest house on the property. Warm, dry, private. Please, let me at least do that much." She nodded slowly, and for the first time that night, allowed herself to feel the exhaustion, the humiliation, the strange disbelief of everything that had just happened, settle into something like relief. As they walked together toward the smaller house at the edge of the estate, neither of them noticed Vivian watching from an upstairs window, her carefully built future collapsing in real time, already dialing someone on her phone with a plan forming behind her eyes. By morning the story was everywhere. Someone at the party had recorded the last part of the confrontation on their phone, and by 9 a.m., clips of Billionaire ends engagement to defend housekeeper were trending across every platform. News outlets picked it up by noon. Whitfield Global's stock dipped slightly on the opening bell, then steadied by lunch. Investors, it turned out, respected a man who stood up for the right things. Maria woke up in the guest house, disoriented, to find her phone buzzing non-stop. Her mother had called 4 times. A cousin had sent a screenshot of a headline with her name in it. Not her full name, thankfully, just housekeeper, but it was enough to make her stomach twist with anxiety. She found Daniel in the estate's small kitchen that morning, dressed down in jeans and a plain sweater, looking like he hadn't slept much either. "I'm so sorry," he said immediately, seeing her face. "I didn't think it would blow up like this. I should have warned you." "It's fine," Maria said, though her voice shook slightly. "I just don't want people thinking I'm some kind of gold digger or that I planned any of this." "No one who matters will think that," Daniel said. Then, more carefully, "But there's something else I need to tell you. About your father's company." He explained it fully this time. How he'd spent the last 8 months quietly working with a small legal team, untangling what had happened in 2011, trying to determine what, if anything, could be done. Alvarez Auto and Fleet's original contracts, client relationships, even some of the original equipment. Much of it was still, in one form or another, sitting dormant in Whitfield Global's smaller holdings, acquired and then largely ignored once the bigger conglomerate absorbed what it wanted. "I want to give it back," Daniel said. "Not as charity, as restitution. The original client contracts, the equipment, seed funding to relaunch it properly, under your father's name if he's willing and able." Maria felt her throat tighten. "My father hasn't worked in 5 years. His knees, his hands. He's not the man he used to be." "Then you run it," Daniel said simply. "You have the business degree. You told me that yourself in the interview, remember? Half finished, but not because you weren't capable. Because life got in the way." Maria stared at him, searching his face for some catch, some condition, some string attached that made this make sense in the world she understood. The world where powerful men didn't hand things back without wanting something in return. "Why would you do this?" she finally asked. "Because it's right," Daniel said. "And because watching you get treated the way you were last night made me realize how much of my life I've spent letting wrong things continue because fixing them felt inconvenient. I don't want to be that person anymore." It wasn't a fairy tale moment. Maria didn't cry, didn't throw her arms around him, didn't say yes on the spot. She simply nodded slowly and said she needed time to think, time to call her father, time to process a night that had turned her whole life sideways in the span of a few hours. Daniel respected that, and told her to take all the time she needed. But as she walked back toward the guest house that morning, something had shifted in her. Not gratitude exactly, not yet, but the first flicker of possibility she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a very long time. 2 weeks passed before Maria said yes. In that time, she visited her father in Queens 3 separate times, sitting at the same worn kitchen table she'd grown up eating dinner at, explaining what had happened, watching Manuel Alvarez's weathered face shift from disbelief to anger at the memory of losing everything, to something quieter and more complicated, a kind of cautious hope he hadn't allowed himself in years. "You trust this man?" her father asked one evening, turning a coffee mug slowly between his rough hands. "I don't know yet," Maria admitted. "But I trust that what he's offering is real." The lawyers confirmed the contracts. "The equipment is sitting in a storage facility in New Jersey, untouched. This isn't a trick, Papa. It's actually ours if we want it." Manuel was quiet for a long moment. "Your mother always said good things come back around eventually." "I never believed her." He looked up at Maria, eyes glassy. Maybe she was right. Meanwhile, back at the estate, Daniel was dealing with his own storm. Vivian had gone to the press with her own version of events, painting Daniel as unstable, erratic, throwing away a real relationship over what she called a publicity stunt with the staff. Whitfield Global's board grew nervous. A few long-time family friends distanced themselves quietly, unwilling to be associated with scandal. Daniel didn't fight back publicly. He didn't need to. Because slowly, quietly, the truth started surfacing on its own. Old employees of Alvarez Auto and Fleet who remembered exactly how they'd lost their jobs in 2011 began speaking to reporters, unprompted, once the story broke. A local news outlet ran a feature on small businesses crushed by corporate acquisitions in the 2010s, and Alvarez Auto and Fleet became the centerpiece example. What had started as gossip about a broken engagement slowly became something bigger. A story about accountability, about a young CEO trying to make something right instead of burying it. Vivian's version of events lost its footing fast. 3 weeks after the party, Maria walked back into the estate, not through the servants' entrance this time, but through the front door, wearing a plain navy blazer, carrying a folder of business documents instead of cleaning supplies. Daniel met her in the main hall, and for a moment, neither of them said anything, both aware of how strange, how full circle this moment was. "I talked to my father," Maria said. "We want to do it. Rebuild Alvarez Auto and Fleet. Properly this time." Daniel's face broke into the first real, unguarded smile she'd seen from him. Then let's get started. What Maria didn't expect, what surprised even her, was how naturally the two of them began working together over the following weeks. Daniel wasn't just writing checks and stepping back. He was involved, sitting in on planning meetings, connecting her with contacts, treating her not as a charity case but as a genuine business partner rebuilding something that should never have been taken in the first place. Somewhere in those long working sessions, something else began to grow quietly between them, something neither of them acknowledged out loud yet, but both of them felt. 6 months after the party, Alvarez Auto and Fleet reopened under a new name, Alvarez and Daughters Logistics, in a modest but renovated warehouse in Red Hook, not far from where the original shop had once stood. Manuel Alvarez, despite his bad knees, insisted on being there for the ribbon cutting, sitting proudly in a folding chair as his daughter, now the company's CEO, cut the ribbon herself. The local news covered it as a heartwarming follow-up to the earlier scandal story. Maria gave a short, humble interview, careful not to mention Daniel more than necessary, wanting the business to stand on its own reputation, not on the story that had launched it into public awareness. But Daniel was there that day, standing quietly near the back of the small crowd, watching Maria speak with the same steady confidence she'd once shown scrubbing champagne off marble floors. He didn't need recognition. He just wanted to see it happen. After the ceremony, as the crowd thinned and workers began setting up equipment inside the new warehouse, Maria found him near his car. "You didn't have to come," she said. "I wanted to," Daniel replied. "I wanted to see it. All of it. From the acquisition papers I found in a dusty file to this." Maria looked back at the building, freshly painted, her father's original company sign, carefully restored from a photograph, hanging proudly above the entrance. "It doesn't feel real yet," she admitted. "Some mornings I still expect to wake up back in that guest house, soaked from the rain, wondering what happens next." "How do you feel about what happened next?" Daniel asked, an odd, careful hesitation in his voice she hadn't heard from him before. Maria studied him for a long moment. In 6 months of working together, late nights reviewing contracts, early morning calls, small moments of shared frustration and shared victories, something had built between them that neither had rushed, neither had forced, but both had quietly recognized. "I think," Maria said slowly, "that I never expected the worst night of my life to lead to the best thing that's happened to my family in 15 years. Is that the only thing it led to?" Daniel asked, and there was something so genuinely uncertain in his voice. This billionaire who commanded boardrooms without blinking, suddenly nervous in front of her, that Maria almost laughed. "No," she admitted quietly. "It's not the only thing." Neither of them said anything more that day. There was no dramatic kiss in the rain, no movie moment underscored by swelling music. Just two people standing outside a rebuilt business that represented years of pain finally being repaired, quietly acknowledging something neither of them was ready to rush. But something had shifted, and they both knew it. Word of what Daniel had done, quietly, without press releases or public statements, began to change how people saw him. Not as the billionaire who'd had a messy public breakup, but as a man who had actually followed through on making something right. Whitfield Global's reputation, initially shaken, began to recover, this time built on something sturdier than image management, actual accountability. Vivian, for her part, resurfaced a year later engaged to another wealthy businessman in Chicago. Her version of the story quietly rewritten for a new audience who hadn't followed the details closely. Daniel never spoke publicly about her again. There was nothing left to say. Maria's business grew steadily. Within a year, Alvarez and Daughters Logistics had secured 3 of its original client contracts back, plus several new ones drawn in by the story of the company's resurrection. Manuel, though he could no longer work the physical labor himself, spent his days in the office, teaching younger mechanics the old techniques, finally at peace watching his life's work continue through his daughter. Maria still thought sometimes about that night in the rain, the humiliation, the cold, the way 200 people had watched and said nothing. She used to think about it with anger. Now, more often, she thought about it with something closer to gratitude, strange as that felt. Not gratitude for the cruelty itself, but for the way it had cracked something open, forced a reckoning that had been overdue for years, for both her family and for Daniel. One evening, nearly 14 months after the party, Daniel invited her to dinner. Not a business dinner this time, no folders, no contracts. Just dinner, at a small Italian restaurant in the city. Nothing like the extravagant venues she'd once cleaned up after. "I need to ask you something," he said partway through the meal, looking more nervous than she'd ever seen him, even during the messiest weeks of the scandal. "Okay," Maria said, setting down her fork. "I've spent the last year trying to fix what my family broke," Daniel said slowly. "And somewhere in the middle of that, I think I found something I didn't know I was looking for. I'm not asking you to answer anything tonight. I just needed you to know that this isn't just about the company anymore. Hasn't been for a long time, if I'm honest." Maria felt her heart lift in a way she hadn't let herself fully feel until that exact moment, because for the first time, there was no storm, no scandal, no audience watching. Just the truth, spoken plainly, between two people who had built something real out of something that had once been broken beyond repair. "I know," she said softly. "I've known for a while too." Their relationship, when it finally became public, unfolded nothing like the chaos of that first night. There was no scandal this time, no shocked gasps at a party. Just a quiet announcement, a few warm articles following up on the housekeeper who rebuilt her father's company, now standing beside the man who had helped make it possible, this time as an equal, not an employer. Maria's mother, who had spent years cleaning office buildings at night so her daughter could have opportunities she never had, cried when Maria told her. Not from surprise, but from the sheer weight of watching her family's story turn, finally, toward something good after so many years of struggle. "You did this," her mother said, holding Maria's face in her hands. "Not him. He just helped clear the path. You're the one who walked it." Maria held on to those words for a long time. Daniel, for his part, used the platform the story had unexpectedly given him to push for real changes within Whitfield Global, a formal review process for historical acquisitions, a fund set aside specifically to identify and support small businesses the company had displaced over the decades. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't enough to undo every wrong the company had ever done. But it was a start, a genuine one, born out of a single rainy night that had forced a reckoning neither he nor his family had been willing to face before. 2 years after the engagement party that started it all, Daniel proposed to Maria. Not at a lavish gala with 300 guests, but at the small warehouse in Red Hook, standing where the original company sign now hung fully restored. Her father sitting nearby in his chair, watching with tears in his eyes. Maria said yes without a moment's hesitation. There was no red dress this time, no chandeliers, no whispered judgments from a crowd. Just her father's workshop, rebuilt from nothing, standing as proof that sometimes the worst nights of your life are simply the setup for something you never could have imagined. On their wedding day, held in a modest garden ceremony that Maria insisted on keeping small, Daniel stood at the altar and watched her walk down the aisle on her father's arm. Manuel, walking slower these days but standing taller than he had in over a decade. In his vows, Daniel didn't talk about wealth or business, or any of the things that had once defined his world. He talked about a rainy night on the front steps of a house that had never truly felt like a home until the day he chose to do the right thing instead of the easy thing. "You didn't need saving," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in it. "You never needed a billionaire to rescue you. You needed someone to stop staying silent when it mattered." I'm just grateful I finally learned how. Maria's vows were simpler. She talked about her mother's hands, worn from years of night shifts. She talked about her father's business, taken and then finally returned. And she talked about the moment on those rain-soaked steps when a room full of powerful people said nothing, and one person finally did. Sometimes, she said, looking out at the small gathering of family and close friends, the people who see you clearly aren't the ones with the loudest voices in the room. They're the ones who finally decide to use theirs. The story of the maid thrown out into the rain and the billionaire who chose to make things right instead of staying comfortable became something bigger than either of them expected. Not a viral moment that faded within a week, but a quiet, lasting reminder that dignity isn't something anyone can take from you, no matter how loudly they try. So if there's one thing to carry with you from Maria and Daniel's story, let it be this. Kindness costs nothing, but cruelty always leaves a mark that outlives the moment it happened in. Be the person who speaks up, even when silence would be easier. Be the person who makes things right, even when it's inconvenient. If this story moved you the way it moved us to tell it, please hit that like button. It truly helps this channel grow. Subscribe if you want more stories just like this one straight to your feed. And if you know someone who needs a reminder that good things can come back around, even after the hardest nights, share this with them. Thank you for watching until the very end. We'll see you in the next story.